Hey, okay. I'm up and going now on both Facebook and uh, YouTube. So, welcome to those that are watching online. We got a kind of pretty much our normal crowd. Do have a couple that are shortened today. They've got appointments and other things, but um, we will continue. Now, if you ever send me a text or email, if you ever are interested in getting one of these top Bibles, they're simply it's a Thompson chain, but they do offer now a English Standard Version, and they even offer a large print version, which is what uh, anyway. If you like the ones in this class, that's the one to get. But anyway, anyway, if you're interested, let us know because it does come in handy. But if you have a Thompson chain, a lot of people I know have Thompson chain Bibles. They did King James version a long time ago. They do an NIV version. They've done a New King James version, and now they've done an ESV. So one of my favorite study Bibles, and the reason I prefer it as a study Bible is because it doesn't get into whoever compiled it, their theological ideas. So what it does is it just refers you to notes in other scriptures where you go and you have to figure it out for yourself. So for a study, it's actually by far better. A lot of times I think we do better when we see things for ourselves instead of someone just, giving us the information and we don't really take it to heart and learn it like other aspects we would. Um, so last week we dealt with David and the final aspect of his taking the census without God authorizing him to take the census, and as a result, we see these things, and we also uh, saw the consequences of it, and he had to choose. What did he want? And he chose to be, God's pestilence for 3 days, and the angel of the Lord. And we talked some about that, but we also mentioned that after it's over, David would offer a sacrifice, build an altar, and have sacrifices offered. He paid for that. He would not accept it freely in threshing floor of Ornan. Now, where was this threshing floor located? It just calls it his threshing floor in the last that we read in the Second Samuel account 24. But where was this threshing floor located? What would we call that today? We had a note. Well, let's just turn to our. You've got your Thompson chain there. Let's turn to Second Samuel 24. And of course, we talked about that the king's account calls this Ornan Arana or something to that effect, and and don't make too much of it's the same person. Ornan is who he's called in Chronicles, and we'll read more about this threshing floor in Chronicles. But if you notice on 2 Samuel 24 in verse 18, to the side of it, it's got that number that Thompson Chain uses, 2439, and it says, what does it say? In 2 Samuel 24, and then next to verse 18, almost 19, it's got the numbers 2439. Mentions the altar. Huh? Well, not the one below the altar one. Oh, yeah. What's it? Oh, Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah. And so, what did we talk about? We know where Mount Moriah is located. What is Mount Moriah? What was done at Mount Moriah? We have this. We built this altar.
The law was,
Huh?
the law was given. Was it that?
No, that's Mount Sinai. Yeah. And Mount Moriah we talked about last week. And we went through this on this 2439. You can go there and it lists all these verses about it. Now, the first time you read about Mount Moriah, now if you go through that tab and you look at that number, 2439, what was the first time we read about Mount Moriah? You go back pretty good ways. At the time of Abraham. What did Abraham do on Mount Moriah? Yeah, that's where he was going to sacrifice Isaac, his son. And, the angel of the Lord stopped him from doing that. So that's the same mountain. But we can fast forward, and what is built on this very same spot? In Solomon's time.
And that where the temple
was built, yeah. So and if you say, well, where do we get all this in one verse? Well, you got to kind of piece it together. And so how would you know what verses to piece it together with? If you were just coming across and you read this, like, well, how can I show that Mount Moriah is the same place? Because you'll hear it a lot of times. A lot of times people will say, Mount Moriah, that's where Abraham offered up Isaac. That's where the temple was built. So where would you piece all this together?
Go back to the back. Find 2439.
There you go. That's the answer. So, and that's exactly how these Bibles should be used, this Thompson Chain. So, when you see something like that and say, well, because if you notice that at this point, it doesn't even call it Mount Moriah. It just says Ordinance Threshing. You'd say, but it's go here, Mount Moriah. How does that apply? How is this the same place? I vaguely remember I've heard that this is where the temple was built. Well, what you could do is you turn there and you would see all these verses, and then you would see that that's where that's the case. And it's nice because, unless you've got a photographic memory, which, I don't have one of those. I have a decent memory, but you don't remember every single verse where these things are, do you? So it's nice if you got just a little bit of knowledge, you studied, and you can turn there, and then you can go find all the verses where Mount Moriah is listed and where it's of significance. And it's not just where it's listed, because, like I say, there is nothing that says this is Mount Moriah in this verse. But it calls it this threshing floor that David bought, and David offered his sacrifice up. And then when we get to Solomon, it says, yes, this threshing floor that David used, this is where the temple was built by Solomon, the very place where the altar was. So we see that these study Bibles are very beneficial for that. And like I say, it doesn't just say it, because I think sometimes when it just says things, you're like, okay, and then you forget, well, where did I find that at? What was that? So these are always there. And so every verse, though, by the way, that has something tied to Mount Moriah is going to have this exact same number, 2439, in that name, Mount Moriah there. So you can go backwards as well. So, say you're reading about the temple and you're reading about this. Oh, well, where have I heard about Mount Moriah before? You can go back and it'll take you all the way back to Abraham. And so you'll see that the connection and the ties there. So yes, we know where Mount Moriah is located. It's, if you see pictures of modern day Jerusalem, the old city part, you'll see this big building that's got this golden dome. In fact, it's called the rock or the whatever. And it's one of the Muslims' most holy shrine. And so as a result, you see that's basically the general area where this Mount Moriah was. New Testament, a lot of times it wouldn't say Mount Moriah. What would it call this area? And it includes the whole area. So you don't know, was this exactly where, Abraham did this? But what does it just call this whole area in the New Testament a lot of times? Still calls it a mount, but it's a word in front of the word mount. Because we think of just the building, a lot of times we think of a temple, but there was a lot else there at the temple. And so it, a lot of times would say the Temple Mount. And so that Temple Mount and Mount Moriah would be one and the same. And so anyway, so that's something that we can see and learn from there. So let's go ahead and turn to 1 Kings chapter 1. Now, we're going to go back next week, and we'll go sideways more than backwards, I guess, and we'll see David's last events as he, really got things set up for the temple, because I think that's a good segue. And then we get, pretty soon we'll get into the temple itself and other things that Solomon does. So we're in the process. We're going to be leaving David pretty soon, but let's go ahead and look at David in his old age. By the way, before I started recording, we was talking a little bit about age, and how that some people, we've got someone in our, congregation, Bob Wade. It seems like, although, I've noticed he's not quite the way he was 10 years ago, let's just say, but, still pretty impressive. And, there's some people that they'll get in their 90s and still be very virile and very strong. I tell the story a lot of times when we moved to Portland, Tennessee, and James Taylor was a little over 1 year old. Had a lady there. She was 99 at the time. And Sister Brisendine was her name. And she was impressive. And one day she took a shine to James Taylor and she hand sewed him an apron just for him. And so, 100 years old, hand sewed an apron. Well, after she turned 100, one day we noticed she came to church and she had a cast on her wrist. And, we all asked her, said, Sister Brisendine, what happened? Are you okay? Said, yeah. Said, my light in my utility room went out. And said, the only way I can, where the freezer's at, the only way you can get to the light, you have to climb up on the freezer and change the light bulb. And I slipped coming down off of it and fell on my wrist and broke it. And we was all like, well, Sister Brisendine, she lived about a block from the church. There's like numerous people that live closer. So any of us would have been glad to have thought. She said, oh, no. I said, I need to be able to take care of myself. And so she had the cast on her wrist. Well, the next Sunday, we noticed that her cast had a big V notch in it. Right there. Had a big V notch in it. And so we once again said, Sister Brisendine, what happened to your cast? Said, well, I couldn't can, worth of, flip with that thing on there like that. So I had to notch it to where I could, turn the cans, open and close them right. And so anyway, that was her. She was, she lived on her own till she was 104. She drove till she was 104 and she was fine. She was the, talk of the town. Turned 105. She went to an assisted living facility. Stopped driving, and she lived to, I think, 107 or 108. So that's very unusual. Until she got to where she was put into the assisted living, she would fly out to California, see her son every year for about 2 or 3 weeks. Just amazing. Now, most people are not that, active when they get up that age. Some are. And then other people, I joke about my mom. I think ever since she was 40, in her mind, she was dying. And she lived quite a bit longer than that. But, some people, they get a certain age and their demeanor is just someone that's old. And I say this to segue. So it says in 1 Kings 1:1, now King David was old and advanced in years. And although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. Now, so maybe some of y'all know how old he was, but so when it says, by the way, you remember back to Isaac, he was old. He couldn't see good, and he was old, and, he lived about another 30 years after that point, because after that, Jacob left and came back. And so he lived a long time after that, but it talked like he was wanting to give his blessing to the son because he thought he was dying. So he was that way for over 30 years after that. How old do you think David was? He's old. Now, Isaac at the time was probably 120 years old or so, maybe older. But so he was old. We'd say that's really old. How old do you think?
I'm fixing to cheat.
We're fixing cheat?
Yeah.
Does it have his age somewhere?
Yeah, it says right there, old age.
Oh, it's probably just talking about old age. Yeah, I don't know. It might. I don't know. I haven't looked that up. It may. Anyone want to take guesses, though? What do you think old age was for David?
Let's say 100 years.
100 years, okay. Anybody else want to take a guess?
Looks like a bandit or not.
And I'm just going to tell you, I'll give you a hint. All but two of us here are older than this.
Oh, really?
I think. Pretty sure. I don't want to make anybody older than they are.
Says
What amazes me is when people in a country
Mhm.
think you're too old to go to battle, there's something going to happen to them,
hmm
you know.
there's only two of us that's older than you, right? Is that what you said?
No, there's only two of us that was younger than what David was at this time.
I'm not wearing it.
Okay, I don't think it'd be there. So let me give you a little more hint. Anyone know when David died, how old he was? Now that is recorded in scripture. I didn't look. I seen the verse, but I didn't record it, so I don't remember exactly where it's at. We'll get to it probably next week when we talk about his actual death. David was only 70 when he died. 70. And he was likely about a year younger here, so he was probably 69.
Who's the two that's younger?
Me and Larry.
I thought Larry was older than me.
He just retired. So, but anyway, but my point is, there were people older than David at this time that probably, but David had a rough life, did he not?
Yeah.
He had been in battles. He had the stresses of all this dynamic with his kids and other things. And so David didn't age well. Let's just put it that way. So we know people like that. We know that, a lot of times, they talk about being president. You look at people, although I don't think Donald Trump looks any different. He's kind of an unusual character as far as that goes. You look at even Biden. Look at some of his pictures when he first became president. And although he was a young man then, and you look at him now, he has aged quite a bit. You look at, I think one of the biggest ones was Barack Obama. He was such a young fella, when he became president, and yet he aged quite significantly in those 8 years. George W. Bush, another one that aged quite a bit. So you see, these stresses, it does tend to age you more. And so, if you look closely at some of the photographs of Abraham Lincoln, he just served one term. He was elected second term, but he was assassinated at the very beginning of it. But you look at pictures of Abraham Lincoln, how young he looked at the beginning of his first presidency before the war started, and you look at pictures shortly before he died, and he aged a bunch, a lot of stress, a lot of heartache, a lot of other things. So,
The war didn't help him any.
No. And so the point is with David, if you think about David, in essence, had two different civil wars of some type. And so you look at David, and so it says he's old, but I think we understand old is relative, is it not? You see some people in their 80s, they're still, doing good. You see some people in their 60s, and they're old and beaten down. So old is not an age; it's how how your body is left with what it has. So there's no, I don't think, any secret to it. You see a lot of times people put on these commercials. Oh, you take this product and you'll be just like me. There's one I've seen commercial. This guy's he's 90 something, says he don't take any blood pressure medicine, never done this, and takes this product. And he said, you take this product, you'll be just like him. And I'm like, no, not that product may not help you, but no, it doesn't work that way. He has been blessed with some really good genetics. You want to look at how old you likely will probably be, look at some of the descendants, ancestors in your family. If they lived a long time, you're probably going to be a lot like them. If they were very active even when they got older, you probably would be a lot like them. If they were not, you probably need to, mind your P's and Q's and try to do things maybe they didn't do. Maybe take better care of your nutrition, take care of your health, whatever. But that's probably the biggest thing. But David was old. He was, in fact, he apparently had some type of circulation problems. That's kind of common. If you're around people that are getting close to that point, generally they have very difficulties with staying warm. Their body, their blood flow just doesn't circulate right. Of course, now we have things like heating pads, and we have, heated beds, and we have, whatever, heated rooms, Well, I imagine a palace back in the day of David probably was a little drafty. So if it was cold outside, it was cold in the house, even with a fire, because, palace would have been huge. So it wouldn't have been like a little small room that you could keep really hot. And so it says in 1 Kings 1 that David was he was cold. So what do you do when a king is cold? Well, we'll see. So it says, now King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. Therefore his servants said to him, let a young woman be sought for my lord, and let her wait on the king and be in his service. Let her lie in your arms, that my lord the king may be warm. Now, before we go further, there was nothing sexual or anything like that. But when they say young woman, this is the word that's used in Isaiah when he talks about that talking about the Messiah would be born of a young maiden. You could translate that way. I know the RSV, a lot of scholars liked it, but it never caught foot because it had such a bad name, because it used young maiden in that verse instead of virgin. Truth of the matter is, this word, it can be translated young maiden, but to the Hebrew at the time when they would write this, young woman and virgin were one and the same. It never would have been thought that a young maiden wouldn't have been a virgin as well. So they become synonymous. And in the New Testament, it uses quite plainly the word that's for virgin, but it was always for virgin. So this would have been a young girl that wasn't married yet, that was indeed a virgin. Then in verse 3 it says, so they sought for a beautiful young woman. Don't really know why they necessarily had to do that. But anyway, throughout all the territory of Israel, and they found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. She'll pop up a little bit later in time too. But the young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not. Now, that's just euphemism. They didn't have sex. They didn't sleep together. It wasn't like that. She was just trying to give some warmth. When you get in that situation, even like, if you're ever stranded, body heat is it is a good way to try to keep warm. And so that's what they did. Didn't have any other means to do that. So that's what they do. So, what do you think? Word gets around when a king is in that bad a shape. Even in England, it's not quite as important now anymore. But when King Charles came down with cancer and everything, they couldn't keep it quiet for long, and so they had to let everybody know that King Charles has cancer, and because he couldn't go to certain appointments, and so people began to speculate. So I'm sure David couldn't go to certain functions. He couldn't do certain things. He couldn't sit on his throne. And so needless to say, that presents some chaos, especially in a less civilized time period. So there's going to be this vacuum now. Well, who's going to be king? Now, David already promised the kingdom to his son Solomon, the second child that he had with Bathsheba, and but David is not going to be around much longer. So, needless to say, his children, they seem to not be as respectful. And so in verse 5, it says, "Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him." Oh, so he's going to act like a king. He's going to be king. He's going to have these people run before him and act like him. So who is this Adonijah? Now, you can go to Adonijah's little bio thing, number 42 in the Thompson chain, and it'll give you a series of verses. But the one that's of significance is his first one in 2 Samuel 3. And this is back in the time when shortly before David is a unified king, and he has several kids at Hebron, where he was located before he became the unified king, and he finally moved out and conquered Jebus and renamed Jebus, or that became known as Jerusalem. So anyway, it says in verse 2, "And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon." Now, what happened to Amnon? Yeah, who murdered him? Absalom. Yeah, Absalom murdered him. Yeah. You just keep that answer; it'll be right eventually. Anyway, so Amnon, he's the one that raped his half sister, and which was Absalom's full sister, and he, needless to say, he was wound up. David didn't do anything, so Absalom murdered him. So that's the firstborn was Amnon of Hinnom of Jezreel, and the second was Chileab of Abigail. Now, Abigail was the one that was married to Nabal the fool, and the Lord killed him, and so David took Abigail. Don't really read anything much about Chileab as far as what kind of person he was. The widow of Nabal of Carmel. And the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And of course, that becomes prominent too. Absalom killed Amnon, and then he went on the run. Actually stayed at his grandfather's place, the king of Geshur. But eventually he would come back. Now, let's just see if you remember. Who was it that went to King David and said, this is time you need to bring him back? Who actually told David to bring him back? You had your answer a while ago. He's going to be answer for a lot of things. So who actually told David, you need to bring him back now? Joab did. Okay. So Absalom, though, never really fully reconciled, although King David thought he did. And so then he started a coup where he was going to be king, who wound up killing Absalom. Joab, okay. So David's nephew, Joab, killed him, which would have been Absalom's cousin. But anyway, he killed him. And David didn't want him killed, but Joab thought that would be best. So anyway, so that's through 3. And the 4th, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. So there we have. Now you say, where's Solomon? Well, that hasn't happened yet. So compared to Adonijah, was Solomon older or younger?
Young.
Quite a bit younger. Yes, he was younger, quite a bit younger. And so let's keep reading then about Adonijah. His father had never at any time displeased him by asking, "Why have you done this?" So, and he was also a very handsome man, and he was born next after Absalom. So another handsome man. That's what Absalom was known for. Don't know if he had the hair of Absalom, but he was apparently another handsome man. He conferred with Joab. Yeah, there's our Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar, the priest, and they followed Adonijah and helped him. But Zadok, the priest, at this time, Zadok and Abiathar seemed to share the high priest duties. But Zadok, the priest, and Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and Nathan, the prophet, and Shimei, and Ray, and David's mighty men were not with Adonijah. So we have a big split. It says Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fattened cattle by the serpent stone, which is beside En Rogel. And he invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah. Well, not exactly all of them. It says, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet, Benaiah, or the mighty men, or Solomon. So he didn't invite everybody, but he invited most. So his point is to make this big production and get everybody on his side. Now, who is, before we go to that, I want to talk about Abiathar. So who is this Abiathar? You notice he sides with Adonijah, not with David. We've read other things about him, and so
Says he was a priest.
he was priest, but we've actually read about him before. So if you went to his number is 5. You notice he's got a number 5, and if you go to it, you can if you want to, but I've got the ones of significance. So the first verse, when we read about Abiathar, we first read about him. You remember when David was on the run from Saul? Is that the very first? Basically, his wife, the daughter of Saul, hid him while Saul was enraged to kill him, and he fled and left. But he didn't have any armament, didn't have anything, and he gathered up a few men, and they had nothing, no provisions or anything. And so they come across to the, where these priests were. And remember, although it wasn't lawful for them to do that, David lied to the high priest, Ahimelech, and said, Saul's got me on a mission. And he asked them, what food they got? What food did they have? They didn't have very much. Obviously, people weren't tithing to the priest like they should. And so what did the priest have? The only thing they had to eat? Showbread. Who was the showbread for? Well, it was for God first, but then who ate it? The priest, and only the priest. But David and his men ate it. And David and his men, they fled. He had the sword of Goliath, and so they got at least one weapon now. But anyway, so what happens to those priests? When Saul finds out, they helped David.
They were killed, I think.
They were killed, yes. Doeg the Edomite had seen this, witnessed it, and he tells Saul, and so they kill the priests. In 1 Samuel 22, 20 through 23, it says, but one of the sons, remember he killed all the priests there, but one of them, Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David, and Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg, the Edomite, was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all persons of your father's house. David's like, I'm to blame. I'm the reason they're dead. Stay with me. Do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping. Is this also this Abiathar? Remember when David could not get the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem the first attempt? He obviously read, well, in 2 Samuel 15:2, guess who two of the people that were there? So Zadok and Abiathar carried the Ark of God back to Jerusalem and there remained there. Now, I'm going to throw something else out there, and if you want to do some homework and figure out why this is significant. Okay, so who was this Abiathar? Well, he was the son of Ahimelech. Okay, who was the son of Ahitub, who was the son of Phinehas and brother to Ichabod, who was the son of Eli, the priest and the judge, the one that raised the young Samuel. Why is this significant? That he is related to Eli as we get into the future, because this doesn't pan out well for him, that he sides against David with Adonijah instead of Saul. So just think about it. Now, another thing, it says it's in Rogel. Does anyone know where in Rogel is? Let's go to a map. Oh, well, let me say, in Rogel, before we do that. Okay. In verse 9, if you got your thing, it lists the number for Enrogel. What number does it list? Middle of verse 9. To the side, it's got Enrogel. No, that's the one below it. It's Feast. What's the one above it? Enrogel's the one above it. Mm-hmm. Verse 9, yeah. Mm-hmm. What number does it list?
4372.
43. So let's go to 4372 before we go to a map. It's actually in kind of the archaeological section of this. You may not even look much at that. 4372. 72. So it's got all this archaeological. You probably not even looked at this. This stuff's some good stuff if you're into archaeology, but there's even more stuff now they've found. But anyway, so 4372.
That's supposed to be beside verse 9.
Yeah.
Mine don't have that 4372.
That's the section where I'm at.
Got 1984, 25, 23, and 394.
What above the 1984? And then 3405.
34, okay, I should it now.
Okay, the Enrogel 4372 is just above it.
Not mine.
Here, let me see yours. Let's see. It may not, since it's in the archaeological. Verse 9. Let's see, verse 9.
Verse 9 right there.
Yeah, it doesn't have it. Yeah. It probably don't have it because it's in the archaeological section. But anyway, it should be in the back though, 4372.
Somebody overlooked it.
They may have.
think
May have.
that's
4372. Or they may not include it because it's in the
Robert or something.
in Rogel.
Or however you pronounce it.
Oh, that's you got 32, 72.
That's 4332.
72 is the one though. 4372.
43 what?
72.
I thought you said 30.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. So 4372. You finding it?
I don't think mine even have that 4372 back.
There you're in the 43 second.
4305.
Yeah,
It's
keep
still
going.
past that.
It'd be past that.
4311. That's it.
Oh, so it don't have it. So that's why I didn't include it. It may not. It may have to. It may have had to omit it. That's good to know the difference. It may have had to omit it because it's large print, and if you notice, it's about the same size as ours. So, so they didn't put the archaeological information. Well, anyway, those that have it, that's good to know that though. In Rogel, now called Job's Well, is a spring that separated the territory of Benjamin from Judah. It lists in Joshua 15:7 and 18:16. It is located at the lower end of the Kedron Valley, just at the point where the Hinnom and Kidron valleys meet. It is near Jerusalem, yet fairly well out of sight of the city. Jonathan and Ahimaaz were stayed in Rogel, waiting intelligence to inform David of Absalom's movement. Now, that's enough. Let's go ahead and go to the map now. So, and let's see if you can find in Rogel from that. So it said it's where the Hinnom Valley and Kidron Valley and Hinnom Valley come together. So the map we're looking at is number, let's see, Jerusalem. Okay, the Old Testament times, map number 9. The title is The City of Jerusalem in Old Testament Times. Okay, so where is in Rogel located? And I've actually got a map, almost identical map pulled up. We can see it. You can see the Kidron Valley. Now, what's significant about the Kidron Valley? If you go up now, by the way, what's nice is see you've got a map number 10 that's the City of Jerusalem New Testament times. We're probably more familiar with this layout. You see Herod's temple. It's got all this extra stuff around the temple. And then you've got the Kidron Valley. And then as you come up, what do you have? You have the Mount of Olives and you have the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus would look out from the Garden of Gethsemane. He could actually see the temple because they both were about the same elevation. Kidron Valley went way down. And you have these large walls. So Kidron Valley, if you follow it from there and you keep going south, and eventually it's going to hit this Hinnom Valley. You see that point? Where they come together? And
Way down here.
yeah, and then there's a spring there. And what's it say? In Rogel, yeah. So that's where it was. Well, I got a question for you. So if you look at things, now I could tell why, even if it hadn't said they couldn't see, I could tell why. But because I'm used to looking at topographic maps. But why that's less than half a mile from there to the temple. David's palace was actually in what we would call the Temple Mount today. Why couldn't you see from one to the other? So it was way out of sight.
Probably the vision.
Well, but somebody would David would have seen. Why couldn't you see from where the temple area was and where the palace was to En Rogel when it was less than half a mile away? I want you to use your imagery.
Mount.
Okay, so we've been calling it that Temple Mount, Mount Moriah. So
Several mountains.
yeah, so you can imagine now. You think, well, from Mount Magazine, I can see a long ways. But what if you're right along the edge of one of the valleys near Mount Magazine? You couldn't see. You couldn't see anywhere near that close. So because of the elevation difference, the way the valleys went, it was so much lower, and there was no way. You had walls and stuff. There was no way to see, even though it was a fairly short distance. And so anyway, so I just wanted to point that out. And so maps can be helpful, but that's where it's at. So I think sometimes when we read something like this, I know times when I was younger, I'd read this and I'd say, "Oh, they must have went way away from the city." No, they just went half a mile, but they went down this valley to where you couldn't really see. And so I wanted to point that out because, they didn't have to go far. So it's not like they were in hiding either. So they were actually wanting as many people to see it as possible. They invited everybody except for the ones who had been the most loyal to David. So let's go ahead and go back to our scripture now. Nathan and Bathsheba before. Now, who is Nathan? Let's remind ourselves who Nathan is as we get to verse 11. Who? Prophet. Okay. In fact, which prophet? What did he tell David? What was he, I guess, well known for? He's the one that came to David after what?
Bathsheba.
After Bathsheba. So,
Your name.
yes. So who is he with? Or Nathan said to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, have you not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, has become king, and David our Lord does not know it? Now therefore come, let me give you advice, that you may save your own life and life of your son. Now, is he doing this as a inspired person of God at this point? Does it seem? Or
Doesn't mention anything about it.
no, he's just giving her advice. Then he's just, saying, hey, if you want to live and your son to live, because what would likely have been the outcome, especially since they weren't invited, what would have been the outcome of both Bathsheba and Solomon?
Will get killed.
They would have been killed, yes.
Massacre.
Yeah. So go in at once to King David and say to him, did you not, my lord, the king, swear to your servant, saying, Solomon, your son, shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne? Why then is Adonijah king? Then while you are still speaking to the king, scroll up here on this thing, I also will come in after you and confirm your words. So Bathsheba went to the king in his chamber. Now the king was very old, 69. And Abishag, the Shunammite, was attended to the king. Bathsheba bowed and paid homage to the king, and the king said, what do you desire? She said to him, my lord, you swore to your servant by the Lord your God, saying, Solomon, we'll see this a little bit next week as well, shall reign after me, he shall sit on my throne. And now, behold, Adonijah is king, although you, my lord, the king, do not know it. He has sacrificed oxen, fattened cattle, and sheep in abundance, and has invited all the sons of the king, Abiathar the priest, and Joab the commander of the army. But Solomon your servant he has not invited. And now, my lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are on you, to tell them who shall sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise it will come to pass when the Lord the king sleeps with his fathers, that I and my son Solomon will be counted offenders. While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet came in. And they told the king, here is Nathan the prophet. And when he came in before the king, he bowed before the king with his face to the ground. And Nathan said, my lord the king, have you said Adonijah shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne? For he has gone down this day and sacrificed oxen, fattened cattle, and sheep in abundance, and has invited all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. And behold, they are eating and drinking before him, saying, long live King Adonijah. But me, your servant, and Zadok the priest, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and your servant Solomon he has not invited. Has this thing been brought about by my lord the king, and you have not told your servants who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him? So what's going to happen? So David is told this. Now, people that even when they are old and advanced age, not feeling well, they can get spurred up to take some action still in a status like that. And that's what's going to happen with David. So it says, then King David answered, call Bathsheba to me. So she came into the king's presence and stood before the king. The king swore, saying, as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my soul out of every adversity, as I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, Solomon your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne in my place, even so will I do this day. Then Bathsheba bowed with her face to the ground and paid homage to the king and said, may my lord King David live forever. King David said, call to me Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada. So they came before the king. Now we're going to see David, you don't serve as king this long without being wise about things. And so David basically puts an end to this mess with his next actions. It says, the king said to them, take with your servants, you the servants of your Lord, and have Solomon, my son, ride on my own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. Now, was this a slight that he lets him ride on a mule?
No, that's not.
That was kind of considered the highest class of animal back in the day. That's what royalty did. You didn't need speed, and so no, this was not a slant. This was something, and so where he would go, the Gihon Spring. If you go back to your map, you'll see it is also in the Kidron Valley, a little bit farther up, closer to the temple. So he's wanting people to see this. Whereas, Adonijah went to a place where certain people couldn't see it, but he wanted the people behind him. David sent Solomon's out in a place where just about everybody could see it. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet, well, they all knew Nathan, they knew Zadok, there anoint him king of Israel, then blow the trumpet and say, long live King Solomon. Now, why would this have more weight than what Adonijah did?
Seen by more people.
Seen by more people, regular people, not just
Closest.
you had the high priest, which he had the high priest. He had the commander of the army, but this had Nathan, the prophet of God. But what else about it? Why was it different?
David, wasn't it?
Well, David didn't go because he's not physically up to it.
I thought he was.
But what did he do?
His mule.
His mule. That means David authorized it. The other one has no authorization from David. So it's kind of a thing where then you shall come up after him and shall come and sit on my throne. So after this, lead him to the throne, and he'll sit on the actual throne. For he shall be king in my place, and I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and Judah. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, answered the king, Amen. May the Lord, the God of my Lord the king, say so. As the Lord lives, has been with my Lord king, even so shall he be with Solomon, and make his throne greater than the throne of my Lord King David. So Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and the Kerethites, they were these mighty men, these soldiers, and the Pelethites, also soldiers, went down and had Solomon. So he had this army behind him. Went down and had Solomon ride on the king's David's mule and brought him to Gihon. There Zadok the priest took the horn of oil from the tent, which, the tabernacle, from the tent, anointed Solomon, and they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, Long live King David. And all the people went up after him, playing on pipes and rejoicing with great joy. So the earth was split by their noise. And Adonijah and all the guests who were with him heard it as they finished feasting. And when Joab heard the sound of the trumpet, he said, What does this uproar of the city mean? While he was still speaking, behold, Jonathan, the son of Abiathar, the priest, came. And Adonijah said, Come in, for you are a worthy man, and bring good news. Jonathan answered Adonijah, No, for our Lord King David has made Solomon king. And the king has sent him with Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and they had him ride on the king's mule. And Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king at Gihon. And they have gone up from there rejoicing, so that the city is in an uproar. This is the noise that you heard. Solomon sits on the royal throne. Moreover, the king's servants came to congratulate our Lord King David, saying, May your God make the name Solomon more famous than yours, and make his throne greater than your throne. And the king bowed himself on the bed. The king also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has granted someone to sit on my throne this day, my own eyes seeing it. Then all the guests of Adonijah trembled and rose, and each went his own way. And then it was told Solomon, Behold, Adonijah fears King Solomon, for behold, he has laid hold of the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon swear to me first that he will not put his servant to death with the sword. And Solomon said, If he will show himself a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. So King Solomon sent, and they brought him down to the altar, and he came and paid homage to King Solomon. And Solomon said to him, Go to your house. This is how Solomon becomes anointed king. Now, it reminds me of, I don't know if y'all watched the election. It really doesn't matter who you're for. It's like very similar in most accounts. So, they always, TV crews, they all have a reporter at each political party, each candidate's office. And when when the votes are being counted and before, the polls close, there's always big party atmosphere. Everybody's always excited and everything. And, now with YouTube, it's like people re-show all this stuff. But, at some point, because they have access, used to, one of the reasons why, why does it take so much longer for the election information to come out? Well, some of it's because silly rules that some states have adopted, but also a lot of it is because used to, they didn't wait till the polls closed to tell you who they thought would win. They would rely on election day polls where people, after they would cast a vote, they would poll people, and they still do this. And they have this information, but the media has all said they will not release it until after the polls have closed. So the candidates, they see this information. They generally have an idea of how the election is going long before. Now, if it's too close, you can't necessarily tell much about it. But let's just say you could watch in, Kamala Harris's party that she had. You could see all of a sudden the demeanor of the people there started to change. And this is long before it was called. And shortly, not too long after that, she had one of her people come out and say she's not going to be speaking. But eventually she did. The next day she gave a concession speech, kind of like this. Adonijah's like, when he hears all this and that David's involved and that all his servants are involved, that the people all see this, the people are all excited, he knows it's over. He knows it's over. And Solomon grants him mercy. I think that's a good sign for Solomon. He's not going to grant everybody mercy, though, that betrayed him. And in your homework, so why was this Abiathar? Why was he not granted mercy? He is to a degree, but not the same way. And what does his ties to Eli have to do with this? There is an answer. It's kind of interesting. We can look back and see all this, and we can put pictures together and things together. Sometimes you wondered, if someone was in that situation, would they not be careful with things they do? Because, there's a prophecy about the sons of Eli. And let's just say it's fulfilled with Abiathar. So, but see what you can. If you can find the verse, that'd be really good. And why is it that he has connection? So some of them do receive mercy to a degree. Abiathar receives maybe partial mercy. But what of old Joab? Now, where did Adonijah, where did he go? Kind of before he got word back from Solomon, what did he do? Where did he go? Apparently went to the tabernacle. And what did he do at the tabernacle? Where was he at on the tabernacle? It said he laid hold of the horns of the altar.
Horns of this.
Yeah. So why would he do that? Well, a godly man wouldn't have killed someone that was right at the altar. That's it's kind of like the temple was a tabernacle here at this time was a holy place, and you wouldn't kill someone inside the tabernacle. And so that's what he did. It's going to play into it a little later on. But anyway, we'll get there next week. Any questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream.